These are 4-1 to 4-4 quiz, and we're just going to go over how they're done. To do a conversion between degrees and radians, you do pi over 180 equals radians over degrees. Pi over 180 always stays there. Now, I have this equaling, what am I given? 120 degrees, so it goes on the bottom, and I'm trying to solve for r. So I get 180 times r equaling 120 times pi. Opposite of multiplying by 180 is to divide by 180. What goes into each of these? 3 goes into there, 4. What goes into 6? Okay, 6 goes into 12 2 times, is that right? And 6 goes into 18 3 times. So hopefully 2 pi over 3. You could have just replaced the pi with how many degrees is pi? 180. So that gives me negative 5 times 6 goes into 180 30 times. Is that right? So that gives me negative 150 degrees. Now you have to use the proportion on this next one. Pi over 180 equals radians over degrees. This is radians, so I'll put that there, and I'll put the degrees here. So you get pi times d equals 3.1 times 180. Does that sound right? And so to find d, you're going to have 3.1 times 180 divided by pi, which is 3.14159. It came out to what now? 0.617. I encouraged everybody to go to 3 decimal places, so that's kind of what I was looking for. To find coterminal angles, you're going to add and subtract 360 degrees. So if I add a complete revolution, which is 360 degrees, or 2 pi radians. If I add 360 degrees, I think I get, is it 225? And if I am I wrong? And if I subtract 360, is that 395 negative? 490. Yeah, I can't add or subtract. 495 negative. And that would be 1 positive and 1 negative coterminal angle. How about 5 pi over 6? You're going to add and subtract what? 2 pi, which I could call 12/6, right? So what you need a common denominator to add and subtract. So you might call it 17 pi over 6. I'm sorry, I said add and subtract, right? If you subtract, what would you get? Negative 7 pi over 6. There are other valid answers, but this is 1 positive and 1 negative coterminal angle. Okay, we had to know, to evaluate these, you would have to know what your reciprocal functions are. The cosecant is 1 over sine. Multiply your top times top. Multiply your bottom times bottom. Anything divided by itself is 1. Number 7, you have sine squared minus tangent squared. They're both at pi over 4. The sine of pi over 4 on the trig table, which I gave you, is this. Tangent of pi over 4, I think, is 1. When you square this, you get 2/4 or 1/2 minus 1. So I'm hoping this answer is negative 1/2 for 7. And this number 8 was supposed to be a cofunction, so I think that would just turn into its cofunction, which is sine. For number 9, I need a trig that involves opposite and hypotenuse. That would be what? Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So anyway, it's the sine of what angle? 48 degrees equals what's opposite and what's hypotenuse? 50. Cross multiplying 1 times x is x. 50 times the sine of 48 degrees makes x approximately 37.157. Does that sound good? And that would be in inches.
Wait, did you just do that in your head?
Now, if I want to do number 10, I have this angle is at opposite and adjacent. That would be tangent, right? Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Tangent of what angle equals what over what? Tangent of 36 is the angle, the opposite is x, the adjacent is 10. When you cross multiply, 1 times x is x, 10 times the tangent of 36 degrees, you'll punch into your calculator, round it to 3 decimal places. Hopefully it's about 7.265, and I think these were in feet. Okay, it says tangent is greater than 0. Tangent is y over x. Greater than 0 means it has to be positive. For y over x to be positive, they have to have the same signs. Cosine is x. Cosine sine, alphabetical. Cosine is x. Less than 0 means negative. So I need them to have the same signs, which is this quadrant or this quadrant, but I need the x to be negative. So that tells me this should be in quadrant 3. Now number 12, they give us some information and they want us to find cosine of x, cosine of theta. So to do that, I know sine is the y, greater than 0 means positive, and so it's either in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2 if the y is positive. Okay, to make the tangent negative, I think it has to be in quadrant 2 because all is positive in quadrant 1. Now tangent, here's your angle. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. In this quadrant, one of them is negative. I believe the x has to be negative, right? So to find the missing side, you could do legs squared plus legs squared equals hypotenuse squared. So 9 plus 1, 10 equals c squared. Square root of 10 would be this hypotenuse. We want to find the cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent to this angle is -3. The hypotenuse is radical 10. You can't leave a radical in the denominator, so you're going to rationalize it and get -3 radical 10 over 10. Okay, continuing with the quiz, we'd go to number 13. Sine of 120 degrees. Let's figure out where 120 is first. Here's your initial side. Here's 180 degrees. 180 degrees. So 120 is in this quadrant. 120 degrees. You'll always look for your reference angle going to the x-axis and acute. So that would make my reference angle 60 degrees. I look up the sine of 60 degrees and I get radical 3 over 2. In this quadrant, it is negative, positive, cosine, sine. I'm looking at the sine, which is positive. So there's the answer. In number 14, you have 11 pi over 6. Your initial side is here. A complete circle is 2 pi or 12/6. If I'm only going to 11/6 pi, that leaves me a reference angle of 1/6 pi. So I look up the cosine of 1/6 pi, and I get radical 3 over 2 again. In this quadrant, it is positive, negative, cosine, sine. So the cosine again should simply be positive. The last couple, one of them is a challenge, like 15. Okay, 15, what's cosecant of -2 pi over 3? You need to know that cosecant is 1 over sine of the same angle. So let's find where -2 pi over 3 is. negative pi, negative goes clockwise. You want to go negative 2/3 of the way here. Negative 2 pi over 3, leaving my reference angle to be pi over 3. So I look up the sine of pi over 3. Sine pi over 3 I think is radical 3 over 2. 1 over a fraction flips it over. Then you might have to rationalize it by multiplying by a fancy form of 1. Okay, when you rationalize this, you're going to end up with 2 radical 3 over 3. In this quadrant, it is negative x, negative y, cosine, sine, so the sign should be a negative. 1 over a negative makes this negative. So hopefully the result is negative 2 radical 3 over 3. And finally, number 16. 16 is a sine of 495 degrees. If you do a complete circle, that'd be 360, right? 360. Another 180, 360 and 180. Well, let's just add 90 at a time. If you added 90, that'd be 450. So if I go all the way to here, it's 450 degrees. And then how much more to 495? I think that's 495 right there. That's 45 degrees more, and that makes my reference angle 45. So I look up the sine of 45 degrees, which is radical 2 over 2 on my trig table, which I provided. And in this quadrant, it is negative, positive, cosine, sine, alphabetical. The sign should be a positive. So it should be a positive radical 2 over 2. Anyway, I hope these helped. Good luck. Bye.